She sat alone in the great interstellar hall, her body still and her eyes glowing faintly in the soft blue light around her. Voices of hundreds of different species filled the air, some laughing, some arguing, some whispering in strange tones. The hall was alive with color and sound, banners of alien worlds hung high above, and lights flickered across crystal walls. But in the middle of all that life, she remained untouched by it, a shadow in plain sight. No one dared to sit near her, no one even passed too close. Her kind was feared. Old stories painted them as dangerous, cursed, and impossible to trust. Every chair around her was taken except the one at her side. That empty space had become part of her, a symbol of the silence that followed her everywhere. Her hands rested on the table, claws curled slightly, but she never moved them. She had grown used to the distance, though sometimes, when the voices grew too loud, she wondered what it might feel like to belong. Across the hall, humans moved. In small groups, tall and curious, always talking, always searching for problems to solve. Most species tolerated them, some even liked them, because humans had a way of fitting themselves anywhere. But she had noticed one thing about them: they almost never looked at her, never met her eyes. It was as if they too felt the weight of the stories, the fear that wrapped around her people like chains. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the noise of the hall fade. For years she had carried the same routine: sit, wait, listen, leave. She was present but invisible, seen but not known. It was safer that way. Safer for her and for everyone else. And yet, deep inside, a small part of her longed for something different, not friendship, not love, but just a moment where silence was not loneliness. The seat beside her creaked, her eyes opened sharply. Glowing brighter, she turned and froze. A human engineer had just sat down beside her. He carried no weapon, no guard, only a small toolkit strapped to his belt. He did not speak, did not even look directly at her. He simply chose the seat as if it belonged to him, as if it was the most natural thing in the universe. Her breath caught in her throat. She could feel the sudden shift in the hall, the way conversation slowed. Eyes turned, whispers began to rise. Everyone saw it. Everyone felt the shock. No one had ever dared to sit beside her before. For a long moment, she waited for him to move, to realize his mistake, but the human only placed a small broken device on the table. Opening his kit with steady hands, he began to work in silence. Ignoring the storm of eyes watching them, her claws tapped once against the table. A quiet sound almost lost in the noise. She did not understand. Was this human brave? Or simply foolish? Did he not know who she was, or did he not care? The weight of his silence pressed against her chest, strange and heavy. It was not the silence of fear, not the silence of judgment, but something else. Something steady, almost calm. She studied him carefully, the sharp lines of his face, the grease on his hands, the way his eyes narrowed in focus as he adjusted the tiny wires. Inside the device, he did not glance at her, did not flinch when she moved slightly closer. He only worked piece by piece, steady and patient. And for the first time in many years, she felt something unusual, a spark of curiosity. The human had taken the empty seat, the seat no one touched, and he had done it without a word. And in that silence, her world shifted, even if only by a fraction. The hall watched in growing tension. They expected her to lash out, to push him away, to remind him of the stories, but she stayed still. Her glowing eyes fixed on the man who dared to sit beside her in silence. The lonely alien, for the first time, was not truly alone. The human engineer did not speak. He simply worked, his fingers moving with quiet skill as he adjusted the broken device in front of him. Sparks of faint blue light flickered as he tested the wires. The hum of energy low and steady. To him, it was only a machine. But to her, it was something much more. It had been broken for years, useless in her hands. yet precious because it was the last thing she owned from her people. She leaned slightly forward, her glowing eyes fixed on his hands. No one had ever dared touch it, no one had even asked about it. And now here he was, this human working on it as if it was nothing more than a puzzle to be solved. She could feel the eyes of the hall pressing in from every side. The silence between them grew heavier, stretching long and deep, yet it was not the silence of danger, it was the silence of curiosity. Her chest tightened with strange conflict. Part of her wanted to snarl, to tell him to leave, to remind him that sitting beside her was forbidden, but another part, a smaller and forgotten part, wanted him to stay. She wanted to see what he would do, how far he would go, and why he had chosen her seat. The human's face remained calm. His focus never shifting, he pulled a tool from his kit, fixed a loose wire, then placed the device back together piece by piece. She tilted her head, studying him the way hunters once studied prey, but this time it was not hunger in her eyes, it was fascination. What kind of being sat beside danger and acted as if it was nothing? Around them, whispers grew louder. Some said he was reckless, some said he was insane, others thought it was a human trick. Leaders frowned, guards shifted nervously, and merchants leaned closer. All of them waited for the explosion, for the moment when silence would shatter into violence. But the moment never came. Instead, the human adjusted one last piece, pressed a switch, and the device flickered to life. A soft glow pulsed through its frame, alive once more. Her eyes widened, the machine worked. It had not lit up in years. And now, because of him, it was whole again. He did not look at her. He did not demand thanks. He only slid the device across the table, his hand retreating as calmly as it had arrived. Her claws hesitated, trembling as they reached forward. The soft hum of the machine filled the silence between them. For the first time in her long years, the empty seat beside her no longer felt cursed. The silence was no longer cold. It was something else, something fragile, yet alive. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from something new. She looked at the human engineer, still quiet, still working on his tools as if nothing unusual had happened, and she understood that this silence was not weakness, not avoidance. It was choice. It was connection without words. And it was only the beginning. The hall was no longer filled with laughter. It was filled with silence, sharp and heavy. Every eye had turned toward the table where the alien and the human now sat. Some leaned forward with curiosity, others whispered in fear, and a few narrowed their eyes with open anger. No one had ever dared to sit beside her, and now a human had done it with no hesitation. It broke an unwritten rule, an ancient line no one crossed. Her people were the untouchable ones, marked by stories of violence and betrayal from long ago. Even the bravest warriors avoided them. Even the boldest leaders kept their distance. Yet here was a human engineer, not a soldier, not a diplomat, just an ordinary worker, choosing her seat as if it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. Whispers spread quickly. Is he a fool? One alien muttered, their scaled lips curling in disgust. Or is this a plan? Another hissed, their voice low but sharp. Suspicion grew like wildfire, racing from one group to the next. Some feared it was a trick. Others thought it was a trap, but all agreed something dangerous had just begun. Guards shifted at the edges of the hall, their hands brushing the handles of their weapons. Leaders exchanged quick glances, unsure if they should step in. Merchants froze in their deals, sensing that history was unfolding in front of them. Even the younger ones, the curious minds who loved human daring, stayed quiet, their eyes wide. No one understood what the human was doing, and worse, no one could predict what the alien would do in return. She felt the weight of their stares pressing down on her. Her glowing eyes scanned the hall slowly, catching the glares, the fear, the judgment. For so long she had been alone, hidden in silence, and now one human had changed everything with a single choice. They were not just watching her, they were waiting for her, waiting to see if she would strike him down or accept him. Either way, the balance of the hall would break. The human, however, seemed untouched by the storm around him. He continued to work, calm and steady, as if the only thing that mattered was the device in his hands. He did not defend himself, did not explain his actions. He simply stayed in silence. That silence confused them more than words ever could. It was bold. It was reckless, but it was also powerful. For the first time, the galaxy's many voices had no answer. The alien leaned back slightly, her claws resting near the glowing device he had repaired, her expression unreadable, her mind turning quickly. She could feel her isolation shifting, bending, cracking under the weight of this strange act. And though she said nothing, she stayed silent. Inside her thoughts raged like a storm. Why did he sit here? Why did he choose her seat? And why did he give her back something she thought was lost forever? Around them, suspicion hardened. Some wanted the guards to act, some wanted him removed, some even wanted her punished for allowing it. But none moved, none dared break the silence that now ruled the hall. The watchers leaned closer, breaths held. They were no longer looking at the hundreds of deals, arguments, and speeches happening around them. They were looking at one human, one alien, and one empty seat that was no longer empty. And in that moment, a dangerous truth spread through the crowd. One human sitting in silence could shake the galaxy more than 1,000 warriors shouting in war. The silence stretched longer. Every watcher in the hall leaned forward, waiting for something to break. They expected shouting or violence, or at least a warning from the guards. But what came instead was smaller, quieter, and far more dangerous. The human finished working on the device, his hands steady and calm. He pressed one last switch, and the machine hummed with life, glowing softly. Then, without a single word, he slid it across the table toward her. The gesture was simple, yet the weight of it rippled through the hall like a storm. Her claws hovered above the device, trembling. Slightly, she remembered when it last worked, remembered holding it as a child when her world still stood. It was the last piece of her people she had carried. Broken and useless for years, now it was alive again, humming with energy. Restored by human hands, her glowing eyes widened, but her face remained still, unreadable. The hall gasped, whispers rising like waves crashing against rock. He gave it back to her. Someone hissed. Why would he do that? Another snapped. Some called it foolishness, others called it betrayal, but all of them knew they were watching something that would not be forgotten. The human leaned back in his chair, silent as ever. He did not demand thanks. He did not seek attention. He simply waited, as if fixing her machine had been no different than breathing, as if giving it back to her was the most natural thing in the galaxy. Her claws touched the device at last, the glow pulsing faintly under her fingers for a moment. Her breath caught, and she felt the weight of years slip away. It was only a machine. But to her it was proof that she had not been erased, proof that her people, her memories, her past still had a place in the present, and this human, this silent engineer, had given that to her without asking for anything in return. The watchers could not stay quiet. Arguments broke out across the hall, voices rising in shock and anger. Some demanded the human be removed. Some demanded she reject the gift. But she did neither. She kept her hand on the device. Her eyes locked on the human, and though no words were spoken, something invisible passed between them. It was not trust, not yet, but it was the first spark of it, a bridge built in silence, too fragile to be named, yet strong enough to shake. The ground beneath them, her claws tapped lightly on the table, a rhythm she could not control. She wanted to ask why, wanted to demand his reason, but her voice refused to leave her throat, and the human, with calm patience, gave her no answer. Only silence. That silence was louder than any speech. It was a silence that carried meaning. a silence that dared to defy the rules of the hall. Every watcher felt it, though none could explain it. Something had shifted, something had begun, and deep in her chest. The lonely alien felt it too. She had lived her life surrounded by silence, a silence that caged her and cut her off from the world. But this silence was different. This silence was shared, and in it, for the first time in years, she was not truly alone. The first spark had been lit, and though no one knew it yet, a fire was waiting to rise. The first spark did not fade, it spread. The hall was no longer a place of trade and talk. It had become a battlefield of whispers. Leaders leaned close to their guards, merchants pulled their deals away, and diplomats narrowed their eyes. The human silent act of kindness had broken something fragile, and now the pieces were falling fast. Guards at the edge of the hall shifted uneasily. Their hands rested near their weapons, but their eyes darted between the human and the alien. Some wanted to step forward, but none dared move first. If they acted too quickly, they might start a war. If they acted too late, the war might already begin. The alien felt the change before she saw it. Her glowing eyes scanned the hall, catching the glares, the whispered curses, the fearful stares. She had been avoided her whole life, left in silence. But now silence had turned into danger. By accepting his gesture, even without words, she had already chosen a side. The human had made her visible again, and visibility was deadly. The human, still calm, returned to his tools. His silence was not careless, it was steady, like a wall against the storm. But every second he stayed by her side. The tension grew sharper. Every moment he refused to move. Suspicion twisted deeper into the hearts of the watchers. One merchant hissed in anger, "Remove him now, before it spreads." Another shook their head. "No, watch them. This is only the beginning." Their voices clashed, low but full of fear, and the air felt heavier with every word. The alien's claws tapped against the glowing device. Her instincts warned her. Danger was closing in. This gift, this spark, was not just a connection, it was a weapon in the eyes of others. She had lived long enough to know the signs, whispers before accusations, glances before attacks, shadows before war. She turned her gaze to the human, searching his face for fear. But he did not flinch, he did not falter, he only continued his quiet work. His silence gave her no answers. But it gave her something else, strength, and yet she knew strength alone would not stop what was coming. In the shadows of the hall, a messenger slipped away. A signal was already being sent, not to the guards, not to the merchants, but to powers far greater. The choice of one human to sit beside one alien was no longer a small act. It was becoming a question the entire galaxy would be forced to answer. She felt it deep in her chest. The weight of the coming storm. Her claws tightened around the device. Her eyes narrowed as the air thickened with unspoken threats. The human had given her a gift, but it came with a cost she had not yet counted. Around her, the warning signs glowed brighter than the machine in her hands, and she understood silence could not last forever. Something was coming, something dangerous, and when it arrived, the empty seat would no longer be just a seat. It would be the line where the galaxy divided. The hall felt colder now. It was not the chill of air, but the chill of eyes, hundreds of them, fixed on her and the human at her side. Every whisper carried weight, every glare carried threat. Warning signs had grown too loud to ignore. She could hear the shift in the crowd, the voices of leaders demanding order, the whispers of merchants fearing collapse, the mutter of guards ready to act. One move, one word, and all of it could break into chaos. She sat still, her claws pressed against the glowing device, her heart torn between silence and survival. The human did not look at her, yet his presence was louder than any speech. He did not rise, did not explain himself, did not defend her. He only stayed, calm and steady, his silence unbroken. It was as if he had placed the choice not in his hands, but in hers. If she rejected him now, the hall would calm, the watchers would nod, the guards would retreat, and the storm would pass. She could return to her old silence. Her empty seat, her invisible life, it would be safe, it would be simple. But it would also be the same cage she had lived in for years. If she accepted him, if she kept the device, if she allowed this spark to remain, the storm would not pass, it would grow. The galaxy would not forgive her, the watchers would not. Forget, she would not be hidden anymore. She would not be alone, but she would also never be safe. Her claws tightened, the hum of the machine filled her chest. She remembered the long years of silence, the stares, the fear, the endless emptiness of sitting alone. And she looked at him, the human engineer with grease on his hands and quiet in his eyes. He had chosen her seat, not with words, not with force, but with silence. He had seen her, not as a curse, not as a danger, but as someone worth sitting. Beside, her breath trembled. The hall waited, frozen in suspense. Every leader, every guard, every voice leaned closer, waiting for her choice. Would she push him away, or would she let him stay? At last she moved. Her claws slid across the table, curling protectively around the glowing device. She pulled it closer to her chest, her eyes never leaving his, and in that small motion, she gave her answer. The hall erupted. Gasps, shouts, curses, the sound of guards half drawing their weapons. Her choice had been made, and there was no turning back. She had chosen not silence, but defiance. She had chosen not fear, but connection. The human did not smile, did not nod. He only lowered his gaze back to his tools. But the weight of her choice hung heavy in the hall. She had taken the step no one expected, and now the galaxy would shift around it. The seat was no longer empty, and because of that, nothing would ever be the same. The hall shook with voices. Some shouted in anger, others in fear, and a few in disbelief. Guards stepped forward but did not strike. Leaders rose but did not act. Everyone waited for someone else to move first, but no one dared. At the center of it all, she held the glowing device close to her chest, her claws pressed against it, her eyes bright with a strange fire that none had seen in her before. For years she had been a shadow, sitting in silence, invisible and forgotten. But now, because of one human and one small act, she was no longer hidden. The human remained steady beside her. His silence did not weaken under the weight of the crowd. It grew stronger. He did not rise. He did not fight. He only stayed, and that simple choice made the hall even more unsettled. For what weapon was silence that it could make so many tremble? Whispers became arguments. Arguments became threats. Some wanted her removed. Others wanted the human punished. But a few, only a few, began to wonder. If one seat could be shared, what else could change? She felt their eyes on her. Not just the fear, not just the anger, but something new. A question, fragile but dangerous. If she could choose differently, if he could choose differently, then maybe others could too. That thought was more powerful than any weapon in the hall. Her chest tightened as she realized the truth. This was not just about her. This was not just about him. This was about the story others would carry when they left this place, the story of the cursed alien who was no longer alone, the story of the human who sat in silence and refused to move. A leader pounded the table, demanding order. Guards raised their voices, demanding separation, but nothing they said could erase what had already happened. The choice had been made. The moment could not be undone. She leaned slightly forward, her voice still locked in her chest. But her silence carried farther than any words. She did not rise. She did not surrender. She simply stayed where she was, and beside her, the human engineer mirrored her stillness. Two figures against the storm, together in silence. The watchers felt it. Some hated it, some feared it. But none could deny it. A change had begun, small and fragile, but real. It had started with one seat, one spark, one choice, and it would spread far beyond the walls of this hall. She no longer felt like the lonely alien. She no longer felt like a curse. She felt the weight of danger, yes, but also the weight of possibility. The fire had been lit, and it would not be put out. The beginning of change had come, and the galaxy would never be the same.